This injustice has gone on long enough. Hey, welcome back to Soup. Today, I'm going to Mars. I mean, not for real. I mean, come on. Have you ever stopped and wondered what the perfect movie is or would be? Maybe Citizen Kane. Maybe it's The Dark Knight. Maybe the perfect movie doesn't even exist and we're all grasping at straws. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. You have been stopped. For indeed, the perfect movie has been lying under all of your crusty little noses since 2012. And of course, that perfect movie is the Disney classic John Carter, starring Taylor Kitsch, Willem Dafoe, and Bryan Cranston. And I know it sounds like I'm joking, but I really do love this movie and believe it's completely underrated, and gosh darn it, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it gets the dang respect it friggin' So buckle up and let's talk about why John Carter is the perfect movie. Now, this wouldn't be a proper Soup video if I didn't trace this story all the way back to its origins, so let's take a brief look at the conception of this story. The story of John Carter comes from a book series called Barsoom, written by Edgar Rice Burroughs in 1912. A whole century before that movie even came out, which is wild. And the Barsoom series is a sweeping pulp science fantasy saga that started with the first book, A Princess of Mars. And this series spans 11 novels, and I'll put all those here on the screen if you want to take a look at them. But this series follows a sprawling adventure set on a dying Mars. And Mars is called Barsoom by the inhabitants. That's why the whole book series is called Barsoom. And the Barsoom series combines planetary romance, swashbuckling heroics, political intrigue, and alien civilizations that would go on to influence everything from Star Wars to Avatar. But we want to zoom in on a very specific novel in this series. In fact, the first novel, A Princess of Mars, which is the story that we see in John Carter. And we're going to get into the story in just 1 second here. And all that we really need to take away from this section of the video is that John Carter is an old sci-fi story written in the early 1900s that rocked so hard that it went on to influence and inspire a century's worth of sci-fi. Now, think to yourself, what does the perfect movie have? Bit of romance, some action, a good plot, few tugged heartstrings, you know, good story, well-developed characters, aliens, ancient immortal beings, Colonel Powell, giant white six-armed gorillas, you know, standard good movie stuff. Well, this movie checks every single one of those boxes, so before we get into any of the nitty-gritty of why this movie is so good, let's just go and get a rundown of the story. And this story begins on Earth in the late 1800s with John Carter, a weary Confederate veteran turned fortune hunter after losing his family and faith in humanity after the Civil War. While Carter is looking for a famed cave of gold in the Arizona desert, he runs into Colonel Powell and some US soldiers who eventually run into some Apaches and end up getting caught in this fight in a cave, and then he ends up also finding an ancient immortal that has a strange medallion, and he shoots this guy, and then he gets this medallion and it transforms him over to Barsoom, or as we know it, Mars. And on Mars, due to the different gravity and atmospheric composition, Carter basically has superpowers, and he can jump really high and he's really strong. All of these cool things that he gets from having like a higher bone density and stronger muscle mass. He is quickly captured by Tharks, which are a race of aliens that live on Mars. And although John Carter was captured by the Tharks, he quickly earns their respect by his displays of strength and defiance. And also during this time, Mars is locked in a civil war between the two main factions, Zodanga and Helium, and we'll talk more about them later. The Tharks end up witnessing a battle between Helium and Zodanga, and Carter actually ends up saving the princess of Helium named Deja. And Deja sees him as sort of a savior to Mars during this time of civil war. And during this time, Deja is kind of in an arranged marriage situation with the leader of Zodanga. This we will later find out is actually a ploy by Zodanga and the Therns to kind of get rid of certain people they don't want to be around anymore. But as the story unfolds, Carter goes on a few adventures, learns about something called the Ninth Ray that we'll talk about later, and ends up actually solving the Civil War and having the Tharks unite with Helium to become this more united Mars, basically. He overcomes some past trauma and he regains his faith in himself and in the people around him. He and Deja actually end up getting married, and during the time after the war and whatnot, a Thurn will trick him into getting sent back to Earth, and then he'll spend the rest of his days on Earth amassing wealth and enacting a plan to get back to Mars, which he actually does, which is kind of cool. It's a fun little thing. And his adventures don't end there in the Barsoom book series, but since John Carter the movie didn't get the dang respect that it deserves. Sorry, apparently that's a trigger for me. John Carter bombed at the box office and was deemed a commercial failure, so a sequel was never greenlit. In spite of that heinous crime, I am stoked to talk to you about why this movie is so good and why I believe it deserves a sequel. Now, let's talk about the world building in this movie because it's pretty dope. Barsoom, or Mars, as previously stated, has been ravaged by civil war for centuries, which has turned it into the red desert that we know it as today. But that doesn't mean that life ceases to persist. In fact, two of the main factions of Mars' prominent race, Red Men, are still locked in civil war as Helium and Zodanga, as we talked about earlier. Helium is a more peaceful and progress-oriented society, while Zodanga is a more aggressive and conquering people. There are no physical distinctions between these two factions, only philosophical ones. And their rivalry has all but destroyed Mars, and there doesn't seem to be any hope in sight, except for something called the Ninth Ray, which you heard me mention earlier, and we will talk more about in just a minute. And there are two main races that live on Mars, and the previously mentioned Red Men, and the briefly mentioned Tharks. So let's talk a little bit more about the Tharks. These are four-armed, green, tall, alien guys with tusks. They're pretty freaking cool. They are a nomadic race of warriors who highly value courage, honor, and strength. And these nomadic tribes live within the ruined cities of the once great society of Mars. But the Tharks would be considered more primitive in their culture. They don't build cities or vehicles of any kind. They kind of just live off the wasteland that Mars has become, and they really don't have much other choice. Tharks have always warred with the Red Men and purposefully distanced themselves from their culture. And now that we've discussed the two main races on Mars and the ones that we see in this movie, let's talk about the scientific differences within Martian science. Due to the lower gravity and the different composition of the atmosphere, the Red Men have figured out a way to make ships that don't sail on the seas, since there are no seas, but they sail on waves of light, which isn't the most realistic idea, but it's pretty cool. And that's not even the most interesting thing about light in this movie. There's another thing called the Ninth Ray, which you've heard me hint at a couple times, and now we're going to talk about it. And to better understand this concept of the Ninth Ray, we need to discuss the third race that I mentioned, the Thurns. In the mythology of the movie, the Thurns are believed to be messengers of the goddess Isis. And we don't have a lot of information about the goddess Isis in this movie. I'm sure there's more in the Barsoom book series, but for now we don't really get any information about her. But we get a good deal of information about the Thurns, so let's kind of break them down really quick. In this movie, the Thurns are an ancient race that have harnessed the power of the Ninth Ray, giving them abilities far beyond anything natural. They have a kind of immortality, and they have technology that appears as magic to everyone else. They play a kind of game or chess match with each other, similar to how the Greek gods do in Greek mythology, but they also do it in unison. And they claim immortality, but we see in the beginning portion of this movie that they are not necessarily truly immortal because John Carter kills one of them. Quite easily, actually. Yet they still find themselves superior to most other life, and they decide to impose their will on any world that they choose. And again, they have all of this great power due to the Ninth Ray. And the only kind of information we get about the Ninth Ray is that it is a type of power source that is derived from light that can provide near limitless energy. And as we can see, it allowed the Thurns to make technology that appears as magic to the rest of the races in this movie. And you may be thinking, Jeremiah, these don't sound like the most original ideas. Why are you so passionate about a mid-movie? And I would respond, what do you mean mid? No. What do you mean this is and what I find interesting about this is that these concepts were written 113 years ago. John Carter isn't cashing in on some ideas that were before it. It is the original. And the blend of sci-fi, action, and romance and everything else that I mentioned before makes this, in my opinion, the perfect movie. Now that we have a good grasp of the story and the world building of John Carter, let's talk about specific elements to this movie that make it the perfect movie. And firstly, this movie starts off as a Western. I mean, Colonel Powell is in it. It's just wild to me that we have a Old West vibes before we even get to Mars. It's so crazy to me. And I just love the fact that there are four armed aliens in the same movie as Colonel Pal. It's great. And there are some actually good sequences in this movie, and I know I've been rambling a lot, so I'm just gonna talk about one that really is just really good. It also happens to be my favorite sequence, and it happens about in the middle of the movie. John and Deja are on their way back to the city of Helium after visiting a temple of Isis and learning about the Ninth Ray. On their heels is a horde of Tharks hungry for blood after being incited by one of the Therns. And there's a moment here where John, having lost his wife and child during the war, decides to stay back and fight so that Deja can make it to Helium and save her people. He says this line.
I was too late once. I won't be again.
And during this scene, he unleashes all of his rage, regret, guilt, and grief on the Tharks with scenes of him burying his dead wife and daughter mixed in here. And this just might be because I have a wife and daughter, but this scene always kind of tugs at my heartstrings a little bit. The shame that he must have felt knowing that his family died while he was out fighting for a war that he didn't even believe in must have gnawed at him every day of his life. And we get just a small picture of that in this scene. We've explored all of the facets of what makes this movie so great. The unique world building, the flavorful story, and set pieces. So why does this movie stop at just one movie? Aside from the monetary side of things, this story just has so much more to tell. And like we talked about earlier, this movie is only based on the first book in a series of 11. Obviously, there's so much more story. And because of this film's financial performance, I doubt we'll ever get a sequel or a continuation, but I still hope and pray that someone at Disney will see the value of this story and continue it on for my sake. And not just for me, but this story has had an impact on over a century of sci-fi that's come after it. It just has a whimsical and unique flavor that's missing in today's cinema. The blend of genres, visuals, ideologies, and worlds just come together so well to weave a masterful tapestry that is both entertaining and inspiring. We get to see alien life and civilization. We see the redemption of the human spirit. We see hope in a dying world. It just has all of the elements of a great story, and we need more of it. Well, thank you all for joining me down the John Carter rabbit hole. I really enjoyed this movie and really think it's just so underrated. I feel like more people need to know about this movie, need to talk about it. It's such a good movie. And in a time when most movies feel like soulless cash grabs, it's good to have stories that have good merit and heart. I also want to thank you guys. My last video, Tron: A Legacy, is now my most viewed video, and I have gained a few subscribers from it too, which is super cool. Your support always means the world to me. I also got this comment, and not gonna lie, it had me in the first half, but it ended up being really nice, so thank you for that. There is just one thing though. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, comment, anything else you want to do down there, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.